Hey everyone, a quick message before we start. As many of you already know, this past week the Magic community mourned the loss of Sheldon Menery, the godfather of EDH.
Sheldon, he didn't just create a format to play Magic the Gathering, he created an entire community for folks who wanted something more from the game that it had at the time. The EDHRECast, EDHREC, so many others. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for the efforts of Sheldon and just everything he did.
Yeah, and we just wanted to say we're so grateful for you, dude. Sheldon helped cultivate this funny little idea of a format and turned it into a worldwide phenomenon. Like, all of our lives are so changed by the work that he did, and so many of the connections and the friendships that we've made through this little game can all be traced back to the efforts that he made to help create a creative and rewarding space for everybody.
And friendships like the ones the three of us have exist because of work Sheldon did. He cared about people enjoying this game so much that he devoted a pretty big chunk of his life to that goal. And beyond that, he wanted people not to just enjoy it, but he wanted the community around it to be a good community. And he led that in a lot of ways, both by modeling really good behavior as kind of the face of the format, and by doing things like focusing on elevating the voices of people that didn't look like him.
Yeah, the biggest point to his character was the work that he did that wasn't tied directly to the game. His work bringing the community together, bringing people together. Everyone always would joke, but we loved this about him. His dinner table was always open to people around him. His house was always open to others. But he had one big rule: you can't talk about magic. But he knew that the magic was nothing without the people to actually play the game.
It was always all back about the friendship. And that man was generous with his pores. Like, he was a great person to share a drink with. Just like,
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it wasn't just about magic with him. He handled his friendships and interactions in a way where he just wanted to interact with people. We had some fantastic conversations about Henry V, about old music, about movies. He could talk about anything. And he would talk with anyone about anything who wanted to genuinely have a conversation.
Yeah. I think just one of the best things that I can think of to say about someone is that they left the world a better place than the way that they found it. Sheldon fought hard to make sure that we could all just have a good time hanging out with our friends. And I'm gonna miss hanging out with you. So rest easy, buddy.
Basically, what we want to say is thank you, Sheldon, just for giving us so much of you, and just thank you for giving us a seat at your table.
Hello and welcome to the EDHRECast, where we're all about commander, data, and dad jokes. I'm Joey Schultz, and I'm joined as always by my fantastic co-hosts. Up first, he wants to use the new Goose Mother card in Untitled Goose Game. It's Matt Morgan.
So I recently, for a holiday weekend, rented a limo and was unaware that there was no driver provided. And it was a total waste of money because, I spent all that money and there was nothing to show for it.
Oh man, Matt, I usually like your dad jokes, but that one was a bit of a stretch.
It was a stretch.
Nice.
Man, cheering myself because I'm catching up with the dad joke abilities.
I'm sitting here like trying to think of a good comeback, and you derailed me. So well played, Joseph. You're finally hitting adulthood.
I'm a grown-up now. All right. Up next, he knows that where there's a will, there's a way, but also where there's a will, there's also sometimes a Rowan. It's Dana Roach.
I went to clear the table after dinner tonight, and I wasn't sure I could make it, but with a running start, I got over.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, all right. That one I don't have a comeback to.
It's like a joke grenade. Like took a second to go off after I lobbed it to you.
Needed a running start.
Yeah. There we go. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm still working on my dad joke, throwing it back, lobbying capabilities. Like, all right. So we're working on it. All right. Matt, this is kind of an unusual episode for us, I think. People can already probably tell from the title, but what are we talking about on this episode?
Well, we're going to dabble, maybe debate a little bit on if Magic creators are out of touch, maybe with the community, maybe with themselves, just with how the game's played. There's a lot to unpack in that question, and we're hopefully going to try to tackle it in a decent way.
And yeah, we hope to be productive. We'll just be like, are Magic content creators out of touch? No. All right, play the credits. The show's over. All right. Yeah, no, it's admittedly kind of probably a clickbaity title, but this is a thing that comes up a lot in online conversations, and it's something that we wanted to engage with as critically as we could, because there's a lot to go into with that kind of thing, and hopefully we can get to a heart of it and find something productive as a result of it. So should be interesting, but we got some shout outs that we're going to get to before we dive in.
First, we'd like to thank Chase, also known as Mana Curves, for their help in editing the show, and you can find them online at Mana Curves.
And you can support the show by liking, subscribing to this video on YouTube, subscribing on your local podcast app, or by going to patreon.com/EDHRECast, where we have patron tiers of all sorts of levels. Whether you want to see everything a day early before it comes out to the regular public, there's all that and more over at patreon.com/EDHRECast, including the weekly patron shoutout, which this week we are going to give a very special thank you to Jessica Bromley. It sounds like some very proper British name, so I don't want to joke too much because I know how British people, they're very proper. But thank you from the UK if you're over there. If not, Jessica, we just appreciate the support anyways.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm thinking of there's a League of Legends character named Brom, right? So Jessica's very Bromley, very there to defend everyone. That's the image that comes to mind. I don't know. I haven't played League of Legends in so many years, but Jessica, I think it's awesome. Thank you for supporting us.
Well, yes, Brom is a support character, and Jessica Bromley is supporting us. So it all adds up now. Nice job, Joey.
There we go.
I accidentally dad joked. My powers are increasing.
Yes.
I oofed it. All right. Okay, let's get into the topic here. So again, this is kind of a weird one. And like, I think right off of the bat, the fact that we are ourselves technically content creators means us talking about our content creators out of touch means just like, gee, you guys, you think you might be biased, but like, I just think that this is an opportunity for us to like kind of pull the curtain down a little bit and just be like real with folks. And so I hope that that's like folks are able to meet us on that ground. So with that kind of said, I don't know, Dana, is there anything that like on this topic you think we need to touch on before we dive into any specifics, or where's your head at when it comes to this topic?
I mean, yeah, and we're going to go into a lot of things that I'm going to briefly touch on right now as we talk here. I do think the reality is content creators, by and large, experience the game in a slightly different way than people who aren't content creators. But what I mean by that, I guess we'll kind of talk about it rather than like me monologuing here for 4 minutes about what I mean by that. We can touch on those various points as we go, because there's a bunch of different ways the game we experience is a little bit different, and we can talk about them in detail as we go. But I do think, I wouldn't say out of touch, but I will note that like our experience is not necessarily the same as you know, somebody who wasn't a content creator going to their LGS and playing just kind of in the wild. What do you think about that, Matt?
Well, I mean, saying MTG content creators specifically are whatever, there's so many different arguments that fall under that very, very broad statement. And so like Dana said, like there's a lot of different arguments that specifically we might break down a little bit. But overall, I don't think that they're out of touch. They experience the game differently, absolutely. But that also applies to literally anyone that plays the game.
So for sure.
It really... the content creators' experience with the game is as unique as the player base, really, I guess, is one way that you can distill everything that I might have to say in the rest of this episode.
No, I think that's a really nice way to sort of frame this. I think the only other thing that I'll say before we get started is that like to label anything or anyone as out of touch is already kind of a contentious framing. So that's why I'm just like, hopefully we can just use this to be like, let's just be like, we're also just Magic players, and we happen to have a YouTube channel. It's like kind of the vibe, and that also goes for, you know, any other creator out there. These are human people. It's nice to talk about human people as human people.
I also think that saying that the three of us here are content creators is very loose and generous use of the title content creator, because I mean, people join our Patreon to let me butcher their last names as part of a shout out. So like, I don't know how much content we're actually making here.
I just like I know that we do have like points to get into, but like it is fascinating to me when we like meet folks and they're like, oh, I love the show, the dad jokes. I tell those dad jokes at work. I tell those dad jokes to my family, and I'm just like, I'm so sorry for your family. I'm so sorry for your work. I'm just like, I'm sorry, like people watch us. Like what? Like that's so. It's just that's so funny.
The dad jokes are such a perfect encapsulation of this podcast. Like we started doing it randomly and plan on doing it for a little bit, and we're still doing it today. And
right.
Years, the dad
literal
jokes,
years later.
Literally years.
So, so getting into some specifics now here, one of the first points that I think we see pretty often when it comes to this type of argument about like there being a disconnect between creators and the player base that they make content for is especially the idea that like maybe creators get out of touch because they get paid to play the game, whereas everyone else has to pay to play the game, making revenue off of videos and things like that. Matt, I'll throw this to you.
To quote an old movie, to quote an old movie that like I can't say the exact quote, but when the heck did we get paid? Because like we still have to buy our cards like everybody else, and we still have to if we go to events. The three of us like we're not getting paid by WotC to go to events. Like we pay our own way to get there, so it's not like we're doing anything special there either. And so that one I really struggle with because like I mean all the cards buy me like I have to buy my own cards, and so
same it's very much same. So yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Like let's say there's hypothetical creators named like Zimmy and Zosh that might be on a really high end, but though the reality is Zimmy and Zosh might get a significant amount of product from WotC and have relationships at a level that some, and again, these are hypothetical people I'm talking about, they're based on nobody in reality,
Dana,
on a show Game Zites. But like, no,
it's Zame Zites. Thank you.
Zame Zites. There we go. Sorry.
The Zemand cone.
Right. It's so variable that like, can you say in the abstract perhaps that because some people get some things on occasion it impacts them? I guess sure, but the variants are just so extreme that like I don't even know how you can seriously really kind of try to evaluate that.
Yeah, and there's like the MTG Ambassador program, for example. I know those folks do get product and they make sponsored content, but that's also very, very different from a majority because the MTG Ambassadors is such a small percentage of the just general Magic content creator population, which is already such a small percentage of the typical Magic player as well. So it's super hard to say that.
I specifically, like, since you made allusions to certain hypothetical people, Dana, I want to be very clear about that too as well, is that, like, I think it would, I don't by any means want to give the impression that we think that, like, therefore,
not at all,
Zimmy and Zosh on Zemand Cone.
And Zachel, don't forget Zachel.
And Zachel Zeeks, which I can't believe you left out, Dana, are, like, I don't want to give any impression that since they have a relationship with Wizards of the Coast, that somehow affects the stuff that they do. Like,
absolutely,
Zame Zites is maybe sponsored by that, but like that doesn't make their opinions inauthentic.
Absolutely,
and they're just very immersed in the game, and being deeply immersed in anything is going to change anyone's engagement with the game. So that isn't an exclusive thing to people who are making entertaining videos. And at least in terms of us, getting paid to do the content, just like I wish this was lucrative, but it deeply isn't. So like that's just also the kind of reality here. But like mad respect to the creators who are so much bigger than us, because the amount of work that they do to craft something super enjoyable for people is rad. And it hurts my heart a lot when I hear people try to claim that their views are inauthentic for reasons like that, because I'm just like, that just ain't true. Like they've got a professional relationship with a thing, but to claim that it's out of touch or that it's like coloring their opinions as a result of that, I'm just like that just like they're human folks who are going to say what they think, because that's the whole point of them being in this community in the first place. Like they're here making the most entertaining stuff that they can in the most authentic ways that they can possibly do, and that's kind of our goals as well. We just I think I've said everything on that. I don't know. I want to be very, very clear. Mad respect.
The one thing I'm thinking of here is like I made a tweet, I don't know, a couple months back about AMC theaters because I had a miserable experience, and I always do at AMC theaters. Okay. I'm not afraid to be like doesn't bother me at all to be mean about AMC theaters when I have a bad experience there. If I have a bad experience with WotC, I'm probably going to be a little more polite in my criticism than I was of AMC. So like, yes, there's I can give you a concrete example of how our, albeit minor relationship with Wizards of the Coast would make me phrase my criticism more politely than I did to AMC. But it doesn't mean I don't still criticize them. It just
but it's still criticism.
Right, they're still. It's just that they're real people at WotC versus like people, the strangers at AMC that ruined my Friday night.
Now, Dana, so that sounds like something that I'm going to call out because only a shill would be nice to Wizards of the Coast, and
Matt,
only a shill would not say mean things, because if it's not mean, it's not honest and it's not real. So. All creators are shills because they're not saying mean things like I want to say to Wizards of the Coast.
Wow,
that's how it works. I hear
that we are connecting some threads here about like there are certainly a lot of online observations or people communicating misgivings that creators sometimes don't feel willing to say bad things about Wizards or their products, and like also the shills argument. If you get paid to do it, then that's going to get like that's tying in here, and like. I don't know how to prove a negative, so like this is a difficult conversation to have, but like it's been lobbed at us, it's been lobbed at tons of people, and it just feels like a really weird thing to do, I guess.
Yeah,
but
it's also
yeah. Go ahead.
We've been critical of Wizards of the Coast. Like I can't count the times that I've said New Capenna's precons were not good. I did not enjoy them at all. They and other, like we've been critical. We've said things. Now we don't frame it as the sky is falling, clickbait, and take it to an outrage type of level.
Yeah.
But we still have criticisms, and we still say this was a miss. We didn't like this. Well, we all have done it throughout the history of this podcast, and so it's funny to me whenever I see us getting called shills because we liked Baldur's Gate, and we were money loving shills, but like. We had to pay for our product for Baldur's Gate the same as anyone else did. So,
and guess what? It was expensive. And yeah, the price of that set was ridiculous. But you know what? Turns out the cards are good. So like, we liked the cards, guys. I just don't know what to tell you.
I could have made a couple car payments with how much I spent on Lord of the Rings. And I was not given any subsidy. I wasn't given any sort of like, a discount. Nope, just cardkingdom.com/EDHRECast.
And like, there are plenty of times to definitely be critical of stuff that the company has done. Do you guys remember the Magic 30th anniversary product? Like, or even of the Rules Committee? Like, there were years ago when the Rules Committee made all uncards legal for a month or something, and I was just like, guys, that was silly. Or like freaking stickers. Like, there's a lot of stuff. Innistrad double feature. There have been plenty of moments where just like, big miss. But like, we don't want to malinger on that, Like, sometimes like it's not proper to bring it up every single episode. So like we've said our thing and we want to move on. And for the most part, I just want to focus on the happy, cool, fun stuff as much as possible, because the point of making content is to hopefully brighten up someone else's day and make them have more fun going on forward. Right. So like, I want to be real, but I also want to be real with people about like, hey, cool. I hope that I made your day better in all of those ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things that it's much easier to beat a drum about something fun and continue to talk about it than it is to continue to talk about the things that are negative.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean you should ignore them, but like, I don't want to do an entire show on negative things. I want to do an entire show on positive things.
Yeah.
So like it's unrealistic to assume people are going to be constantly on the attack versus for something that they find fun. They're going to talk about the fun things or the enjoyable things, or it's one of those things that I don't know what the expectation there is. What's the amount of criticism one is supposed to levy before it's acceptable? Now you've hit enough and we can move on to the good stuff. Like, I don't know.
If I had a quarters for every time that outrage at Wizards of the Coast for whatever silly thing we disagreed with, like,
wow,
I mean, we could build a couple of commanders with all those quarters that we'd have, but there's a time and a place for everything, like Joey hinted at, and this place is it's a time for how can we help educate, how can we help bring some entertainment, just some fun to it. Our social medias, Dana especially, like Dana doesn't pull near the punches on social media as we do here. And just because there's a time and a place for that. Like if we see a problem, we'll mention it here. We'll talk about it a little bit, but then for the most part, we're going to move on. If we want to have a conversation about that further, then go to social media. That's what it's there for. But this isn't the place to just beat something to death. And I think there's a little bit of a disconnect and maybe how it's consumed versus how we intended for any of the content to come out. And so maybe, I don't know.
No, like I think that this is an episode where I'm encountering myself in like doing a lot of trail offs as well. Sure. I round out this thought, but like the end of the day, the thing that people want to know is that they can go to the creators that they enjoy and the channels whose content that they like, and they will find an authentic and useful and entertaining experience. And so that's what we want to provide. But certain realities will come knocking, right? Like, we got to eat, for example, and like we categorically we do not come out money positive to make this show or to stream. Like that's just
not
like,
even close.
We deeply don't make money off of this. And like the command zone employs like 24 people. That is 24 salaries. So like when real life comes knocking, that's when they're going to be. You have to have a certain strategy for how it is that you're going to make content. And I mean, it's a strategy game, so it's good that we have a strategy, and we like to think that we're kind of decent at that. But when people perceive that change, that's what reads as like, well, the way that you were making content initially when I first started following feels different than the way that you're doing it now. And you worry, therefore, that the creator is no longer authentic and that they've lost, and therefore that you have lost a trusted source of your entertainment. And so like with this, my goal isn't to like defend creators against the mean old internet or whatever. I just think that it's kind of helpful to provide, hey, here's some complexity about just the realities of this situation, because we're losing so much money to do this, but we just really enjoy doing it with you guys. And we hope that we can do it in a way that makes it so that we can do it as long as possible.
And if you just want negative content, that's why Reddit exists.
and you know what? I mean, Matt, you made an allusion to it earlier, but there are certain outrage merchants out there who will put advertisements on their apology videos. And I have certain thoughts about that, but that's not the way that I want to model the stuff that we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's right to be distrustful of certain things out there. I totally get that. There are creators that I've seen who are just like, I think I've fallen out of what this love, because this used to be one thing and it feels a little bit different now. I get that. That's totally cool. I just think that it's like the creators out of touch as the umbrella of this. Just like applying that distrust everywhere is kind of a defensive reaction. And I get where it comes from, but like, pulling the curtain down, hopefully understanding the complexities behind some of those things can deepen people's enjoyments rather than making them feel a little bit defensive or worried about the authenticity of the stuff that they're consuming.
Well, and I don't think the distrust is unwarranted either, because obviously some sort of behavior leads up to it, kind of like how Joey distrusts anytime I start talking, because
Matt.
I'm going to segue into challenge stats.
Matt, I'm getting up from this chair, dude.
I'm sorry that I broke your trust, Joey. And it is a behavior that my behavior has cultivated that reaction in you, and your feelings are valid, but the segue also is valid.
I don't think I'm on screen for this part of the YouTube videos, but listeners, if you could see my face. Love you, Matt. So how about we take a brief pause and go into one of our favorite segments on the show, Challenge the Stats, because there's so much data on EDHREC, and we don't always agree with it. So we'll be right back after this break. It's the end of summer, fall is now in swing, and I don't know about you, but this is always the season where things get wildly busy in our lives, right? I know I never have time to cook, and also I know that I can't cook, but I want to make sure I eat well, and I want you out there to eat well too. So that's why, in my house, we use Factor meals, and that's why I think you should give it a try as well. Factor is America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. They have these awesome meals that get delivered straight to your door, and they're ready in just 2 minutes. My partner and I have been using Factor for, I think, like maybe a year now. They're really just splendid, and they have these dietitian-approved meals that are around 550 calories a serving, and those have been really great for helping me save time, helping me eat well, and helping to stay on track as I moved into a healthier lifestyle. And I'm not talking about, it's a healthy meal that isn't fun to eat. No, I'm talking about red pepper queso chicken. I'm talking about sage pork chop. I'm talking about meals that even Guillaume Master Chef and Asmaranica Mardica Dystina Koldakar would fawn over. Seriously, give Factor a try. Head to factormeals.com/EDH50 and use code EDH50 to get 50% off. That's code EDH50 at factormeals.com/EDH50 to get 50% off.
I have kind of a nebulous challenge this week that I kind of accidentally stumbled into and have since intentionally started using it and been pretty happy. The One Ring has been absolutely wrecking other formats, but it's still a very good card in Commander. And for those that don't recall, 4 mana, and when it ETBs, it gives you protection from everything. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on it. And whenever you tap it, you put a burden counter on it and draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. It also is indestructible, which keeps your opponents from destroying it, but also can make it pretty tricky in a lot of situations for you to get rid of it. I'm running it in a couple different monocolored decks, one of which happened to just accidentally, for other reasons, have the land card Phyrexia's Core, which is currently in about 16,000 decks. Phyrexia's Core taps for colorless mana, and you can spend 1 to sacrifice an artifact and gain a life. I just so happen to have the One Ring out and have a dangerous amount of counters on it, and have Phyrexia's Core in play, and it kept me from losing the game to my own One Ring. So I went back and put Phyrexia's Core in a couple of my other monocolor decks that were also running the One Ring. And at least one additional time since then, I've been able to use it to save myself from my own The One Ring.
Wow.
I don't think it's the kind of thing you want to worry about adding to a 3-color deck, but maybe a 2-color deck, but definitely a 1-color deck. You can afford a utility land like Phyrexia's Core, and even if it just saves you on occasion, there's very little downside to it and a pretty decent amount of upside. And for a card that's only been out at this point about 2-ish months, to have that have saved me from dying to my own One Ring 2 different times is pretty good. So I think if you are running the One Ring in a 1-color deck, it's worth taking a look at adding Phyrexia's Core in there. There's just not much downside. You might find some extra upside to it. And occasionally it's going to save you from a One Ring with 8 counters on it or something.
Dang. Dana, maybe this is a symptom of me being too online. But I find it very funny that we opened with, like, yeah, we don't make a lot of money to be able to do this. But we opened with the idea of, like, oh, creators get paid to play the game. And here you are talking about a card that is like $50 or $60 that you have in multiple of your decks.
Yes.
And I feel like that's probably fair. A point we need to clarify before we continue with Challenge the Stats.
So I sold the kidney is what I did. I was able to get a couple of One Rings with that kidney. And I saved someone's life. So, like, really, if you think about it, I'm kind of a hero.
I just stopped eating avocado toast for a month.
There we go. That would work as well.
Here's really what it was. I'm just like, I'm glad you treated yourself to cards that you enjoy. And I know that there are people who will proxy this kind of thing. And if they're doing that or whatever, you know, Playgroup's all cool with it. This sounds like cool tech. Yeah.
Phyrexia's Core will destroy a proxied One Ring as easily as it will destroy a real one.
There you go. Oh, man, that's hilarious. All right, I'll move on to my challenge here. And I've got our listener submitted challenge, the stats for this episode. This one comes to us from Simeon Dickman, who wanted to point out a challenge. This is actually kind of a repeat challenge. And Simeon brings up, like, hey, I know that you guys have challenged this before with Shelob, the Child of Ungoliant, but Academy Manufactor also has the same non-bow situation going on with Bernard, which is a new commander that also cares a whole lot about making a lot of food tokens and a lot of golem tokens. When we had this challenge earlier, we noted that Academy Manufactor, which says if you would make a treasure, a clue, or a food, instead make one of each, that apparently doesn't work with the types of food tokens that Shelob is doing, and apparently the same goes for Bernard. So the 35% of Bernard decks that are playing Academy Manufactor, you might want to watch out, because those types of things, it's non-bows in both ways. If you just care about making a bunch of regular food tokens, totally cool, but when you're using the Academy Manufactor replacement effect, you're not going to get the Bernard replacement effect or the Shelob replacement effect. So be careful on that one, and Simeon, thank you so much for this non-bow challenge. That's a really cool one to shout out.
Well, I'll wrap us up then real quick with my challenge this week. So my challenge is going to be for one of the new Wilds of Eldraine commanders. It is Kellen the Fey-Blooded. A lot of people seem to be excited about this Boros Equipment Matters commander that's doing things on a little bit different axis. We talked about it last week, how it's attacking, you wanted a lot of equipments on it, but also you want to be able to go wide as well. So one card that I think plays perfectly with this strategy. So Kellen, like I said, other creatures get +1/+0 for each aura and equipment attached to Kellen the Fey-Blooded, which means you're going to want to have a bunch of equipment on the battlefield, but also you're going to want a bunch of creatures going around. So say Kellen the Fey-Blooded gets killed once or twice, what are you going to do? How do you go about winning the game? And so one card that I've challenged before that I still think is absolutely fantastic, also for this deck, is Goldwarden's Gambit. It is 6 red for a sorcery that has affinity for equipment. That means you can tap one of your equipments to help pay for some of the generic mana costs. And then you create 5 2/2 rebel creature tokens that gain haste until end of turn. And for each of those tokens, you may attach an equipment to it. So if you have a bunch of equipment laying on the battlefield, you can power out Goldwarden's Gambit, make an army for when you get to cast Kellen again later on down in the game. And then, oh, by the way, you still have all those equipments that are going to go onto these rebels that you just created. It's an absolutely fantastic card. I love it in my Valdek Keeper the Flame deck. This card just seems to keep getting overlooked more and more, and there's just more and more commanders that seem to be absolutely fantastic for it. It's only in 3,500 decks total right now, and only 14% of Kellen decks. I just think that if you want a bunch of bodies on the battlefield for Kellen's ability, you have a bunch of equipment laying around anyways. Gold Warden's Gambit does everything that the deck wants to be doing, so absolutely give this a shout if you're building those Kellen the Fey-Blooded decks.
Cool stuff, dude. All right. So now I guess we're getting back into this kind of thorny topic, which I hope we're talking about productively. I hope that this is an interesting, just opportunity to be real with folks. And kind of going back into it, I think another one of the concerns that it often comes up, worries that, that there's a disconnect between like creators and stuff or anything like that. I guess another thing that I often see is the idea that since creators have regular playgroups, they don't necessarily understand what it's really like to play against strangers. And I mean, just right off the bat, I wildly disagree with that in a way that I almost feel offended by it, but I don't want to linger on that negative emotion. So Dana, I'm just going to ask you to say words now.
Sure. I mean, this is one of those situations where I talked about where creators probably do experience things a little bit differently. I've played 200 and some games so far this year. And yeah, half of them have been with other content creators, primarily you two. But half haven't. Half have been at various LGSs and at events and stuff. So while I absolutely do play with a pod that lets me shortcut the Rule Zero conversation and lets me not have to worry about pub stomping, that kind of stuff, because that's not going to be an issue when I'm playing with you guys. There's also 100 games where I do have to deal with those things. And that's still a lot of games. I'm still out there experiencing that, playing against strangers in strange environments. So, are there content creators that never leave that safe bubble of playing with their friends? I'm sure there are, but I don't necessarily think that's the norm. I think most people are out there actually playing games in the wild too, in addition to the ones they're playing in kind of the safe space of playing with other content creators.
Well, and this brings up this weird self-own too, that people say that content creators have regular play groups, so they don't know what it's like to play against strangers. That implies that the typical player doesn't have a regular play group, which I would argue is completely false.
Yeah.
Most of the game, Wizards of the Coast has even said, because from their market research, most players don't know that there's a Twitter sphere out there specifically for Magic the Gathering. They're playing at the kitchen table with their friends in their regular play group. So
right.
Maybe sometimes they go to an LGS or whatever, but also we pay for our own way to get to different Magic cons. We went to Minneapolis, or we're going to the Magic Summit in Salt Lake City. We pay for our way to get there, and we play with strangers all day. Joey, I have never seen a man so intent on playing so many games of Magic with so many different people as Joseph M. Schultz.
Because they're cool people.
Yeah, as Joseph M. Schultz at one of these events. He is always playing with strangers. And so it's weird hearing this argument, because we get to go to players, and if anything, Magic has given me the ability to go to these events and get to meet so many different people and play games with them. And so,
yeah,
I don't know, hearing that we don't know what it's like to play against strangers, I really struggle with that argument or that accusation, or whatever you want to call it.
And I guess the reason that I feel like I have an immediate kind of reaction to this type of statement or this type of accusation is that it again sort of, is a labeling of inauthenticity. And it's just don't put that on me. That ain't true of me. But it also it kind of puts a value judgment on people who have regular playgroups don't understand what it's really like. And I'm just well, no, there's no one correct way to play Magic. So if you're regularly playing against strangers because you don't have a regular play group, that's totally cool. Yeah. Power to you. If you do have a regular play group, cool, power to you too. Mm-hmm. And I think especially this type of thing comes from usually a bad experience where if all that you are able to do is play against strangers, for instance, and those Rule Zero conversations are difficult and you don't get the gaming experience that you want, then it does kind of cause a resentment a little bit against the folks who do have a more regular, but possibly a more comfortable group that they can play with, where they do get the type of experience that you want. And yeah, that absolutely does suck, but that doesn't mean any one of those paths is a good or a bad path. And there's not a value judgment that we need to project onto other people as a result of that. And I think that's why I have kind of kind of a reaction to that. It's just like, no one's playing Magic wrong when they're playing Magic how they're able to play Magic.
No,
that's all it comes down to for me.
And yeah, like there's definitely like some things worth mentioning here. Like there's a phenomenon called the Hawthorne effect, where human behavior is modified when people realize they're being observed. So, if you're playing a game with somebody, whether it's on stream or at an event, and because you're a content creator, there's people oftentimes standing around.
Yeah.
So like that is going to change how people play. That's going to impact what they're doing. Maybe they're more nervous. Maybe they're trying to show off for somebody.
Yeah.
And maybe that affects them more than affects us who are used to dealing with this kind of stuff. But like it goes both ways too. If someone is maybe playing harder or playing differently or making more mistakes because they're nervous about playing against a content creator, there's perhaps somebody else who's going to go harder and like try to focus us out, even if maybe isn't the best idea strategically, because they want to go home and say that they were able to beat some content creator. So like,
yeah,
I mean, it's definitely different and it definitely is impacted by the fact that like we are known content creators, but I don't know if you can say that it impacts how we experience the game positively or negatively. I think it's a lot of both of those things.
I also want to point out, like, as fun as it is to joke that like I was recognized at the gym one time, it is super refreshing and I enjoy and appreciate. And I think it says a lot about just the size of the game too, is we went to a Magic Con in Minneapolis a couple of months ago where we sat at the creator booth and we did a meet and greet and it was a great time. We met a bunch of people and it was fun signing cards, whatnot. Then we went to the command zone and we played games, and I would say half the people didn't know who we were.
We're team. Yeah.
And I love that. It'd be like it. Yeah, it's fun to pretend and like we have C-level celebrity and a C-level hobby and like joke about it.
Yeah.
But also I love being able to go to those events and just being another face in the crowd. And that's one thing that and yes, every now and then, oh, you're Matt, aren't you? Oh, cool. I like your stuff. We're there for the same reason any other typical attendee is, and that's just to play as many games as possible and have a good time.
Matt, I want to go back real quick to a thing that you said earlier. You mentioned Wizards market research showing the size of the player base being a whole lot bigger than the online Magic sphere. And I really want to hammer that point home. I think it's important to really linger on that because it's true. The average Magic player is not a consumer of Magic content. The average Magic player has not heard of EDHREC. And if we need proof, I'd say look at Universes Beyond crossovers. Right now, Wizards is 100% all in on new player acquisition as like the primary driving force of the company. Because Magic isn't a household name, but Doctor Who is. Lord of the Rings is a household name. And we know the strategy of appealing to that huge, big market is working and profitable, because if it wasn't profitable, they'd be losing money. And that's the one thing that a company cannot do. They cannot abide losing money. And seriously, like Wizards struggles to even justify Magic cons to Papa Hasbro because they're not good onboarding tools for new players. Mostly only enfranchised players attend Magic cons. And Hasbro knows that that's not the audience that pays them most, which means that Magic cons aren't as profitable as other things that those resources could be going into, and to a corporation that's opportunity cost, that means lost profits. So like, yeah, that's the scale that we should acknowledge. Like the one thing that we can definitely trust about Wizards is to have accurate marketing data about their market. We know and love a lot of employees at the company who do amazing work, but as a company entity, let's just acknowledge that Hasbro and Wizards ultimately care more about accurate market data than they do about balancing a format. That's not a scale that we as immersed players experience the game on, so to us online, it can feel like the stuff that happens online is a big deal, but this bigger scale is the perspective worth keeping in mind so that we can engage with our hobbies more realistically, I guess.
Well, you mentioned the authenticity of it, Joey. That kind of brings me to the next point I hear sometimes about how content creators, particularly when they're playing kind of games, is that it's scripted.
Oh, good Lord. So oh man.
So if people think that we can script games that we play on Twitch, for example, thank you, because that's such a huge compliment. Because writing scripts, this is coming from a theater minor. Writing scripts is hard.
Oh my word, yeah.
Acting them out is hard. And so, man, I really get flustered with this. Like, even like people like MTG Mudsta and Andrew, great gameplay videos. And
go watch Mudsta. He's so cool, yeah.
Yeah, and he'll just be like, yeah, we miss triggers. And if you think that I want to script right into my script that I missed like 4 Ristic study triggers when I go and play with my friends, no, Get out of here. That's like saying the NFL is scripted. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, okay, so like the thing that gets me activated about this, I mean, Matt, let's be honest. Those comments aren't talking about us. They're usually talking about stuff like game nights, right?
Yeah.
Or, sorry, Zamezites. And like, it's not like a show of that caliber needs any defending. But like, people peddle those conspiracy theories to us. And I'm just like, my brother in cardboard, what are you doing in my DMs? I'm not buying your Pepe Sylvia nonsense. I've been on those sets. I've watched these people work. They really are just that dang good at their jobs. And also, you know for a fact that if any of those conspiracy theorists were ever invited onto that kind of show, they would change their tune in a heartbeat.
Sure.
It's just it's so ridiculous. But okay. So like, I'm sorry, I get activated. I'm sorry. I'm gonna try and calm down because like, so that's just the most extreme version of that kind of thing, right? But there's also a subset of this where people frame it as like, oh, X channel is so much better than Y channel, and that's also kind of a pet peeve for me because I'm like, why the comparison? I'm glad we have Game Nights and Mudsta and Quintessential Commander. I'm glad and Elder Dragon Hijinks and Shuffle Up and Play and tons more. Like it isn't a competition. Every single one of those creators, everyone involved with them, they all want each other to succeed. It's 100% fine to have different tastes. If you prefer different vibes, that's totally, yeah, absolutely go for it. That's why there's a market for so many of these different creators. I just take umbrage when someone uses difference in taste as a reason to crap on other people's taste. Like, just like cynicism doesn't make anyone better at Magic. I think it makes you worse at Magic if you approach everything with defensiveness or with doubt. I just think that's a bad habit worth addressing and squashing.
Now, one thing I think is worth mentioning here, because we mentioned the NFL a few minutes ago. Now, there's a difference between something being scripted and something not being entirely raw. Now, imagine if instead of the NFL just showing you the Packers versus Bear game on Sunday, the Packers and Bears played 3 or 4 or 5 games, and the NFL just showed you the top 15 plays from the best one of those games. It isn't necessarily scripted. You are just seeing the best version of the thing that happened. And there's definitely an element of that happens particularly with gameplay video that's going on YouTube that's like, been pre-recorded, where like when the person combos out on turn 1 and runs around the room taunting everyone, like they're just going to not air that game. They're just going to air the game where like everyone was relatively competitive and interesting things happened.
I think when people accuse something of being scripted, they're kind of revealing the limitations of their own imagination, that they don't think that a group of normal human people can pull off a really cool thing. Sorry, is that me? I'm just like, you think they gave Post Malone lines? I'm just like, come on, you guys. Like that's as spicy as I'm gonna get, maybe. But I really don't like that. There is a thing that's sort of connected to this though that I think is probably worth mentioning, and something that Dana, you touched on when we had Jim on the show a little while ago, about like when you're aware, and it kind of goes back to the Hawthorne thing that you were mentioning, when you're aware that you are being watched, that does kind of change your decisions a little bit.
Sure.
And like we have noted that there are, after we've been streaming and like playing in front of 200 however many viewers live at that time, that did kind of start to affect the types of cards that we wanted to play. Like, I think that's probably worth mentioning as well. When you're aware that you're going to be recorded, that might change the way that you play the game, whether you're sandbagging certain spells. Like, I don't want a recorded game to go for 3 hours. I don't think the audience is going to like that. The thing is, I feel like I do that in regular games too, like not just when it's being recorded.
Yeah, well, and I would argue to that point even, it's not that I build decks because of the way that I want to do it, but also there's a time factor in it. So if the game isn't fun to play, 99% of the time it's not going to be fun to watch. And so if I'm playing cards that are going to make a game a slog, like spending half my time shuffling and tutoring and all this stuff, it's not going to be fun to watch. And so I'm going to take out tutors from my decks. I'm going to take out fetch lands and maybe play a less optimal mana base for whatever reason. But that's also because it's just going to make sure that I spend less time dirtling around, but also the viewers have less time to sit and wait while I search for any given card.
Yeah.
And I'm also like, we've all talked about the things that we do differently with the decks that we brew, that we play on stream, particularly the last couple of years as we've played more and more online. We've changed a lot more things. But we're not going back then when we go to our LGS or go play, in public and places,
right,
and putting those tutors back in.
Right.
Yes, we've changed the decks that we play to play on stream, but the 100 games that I'm playing a year with people that are strangers and aren't you guys, those are the same decks I'm playing on stream.
Mm-hmm.
And we did a show where we talked about how many games we're winning in Commander, and I'm doing just fine. playing with those decks that are built to be played on stream, that are running a few less board wipes and less tutors and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I'm doing okay. So, like, yes, those decks are slightly different, but you know, it is what it is.
Are you guys familiar with Dimension 20? Like Brendan Lee Mulligan doing all of the D&D stuff there.
Mm-hmm. No idea.
I think you'll appreciate this. Like as a game master, as a dungeon master for the games that he's facilitating that are being recorded, that they're playing these fun D&D campaigns for everyone. He's got a quote about like, if you've got a person who's getting to a moment of like Sam carrying Frodo, it's just like, I can't carry the Ringmaster Frodo, but I can carry you. If that's happening in your game, and then you ask that person to roll a skill check to see whether they can actually carry, and then they fail the check, like, no, let the person do the fun moment. That's the point of the gaming thing that you're doing. Like, we're here to have the fun. And I think that folks detect those types of moments, and then they're like, well, that's not true to the game. But like the sanctity of the gameplay doesn't matter to me as much as like, did we all have an awesome freaking time? Because I want more Sam carrying Frodo moments in like every movie I see and in every game that I play.
Well, and saying that something isn't true to the game, that is such a prickly argument to me, because I've gone to an LGS before and played with 3 total strangers, and I've sandbagged cards before because if I would have played something, it would have knocked out somebody who was super far behind, and maybe I needed them to be relevant, to take some attention off of me, or I just wanted them to be able to participate because there was a 13-year-old kid playing his 4th game of Magic ever. And so I've sandbagged cards in regular games before with strangers. And so saying that man, I really struggle with that argument. Mostly because it's about the experience. Unless you're in a tournament setting, whether it's CEDH or 60 card formats, whatever, where winning is the obvious goal, the goal should be the experience, the shared experience you have. And so if you're doing something that increases the shared experience, that is the goal of the format. That is in the spirit of the game, not to be absolutely cutthroat in all moments possible. And like, I understand I'm probably a little passionate about this point, but really you should be out there building decks and making gameplay choices that are going to make sure you get invited back again, whether it's with strangers or with friends.
There you go. I love that phrasing. Like, that's how I want to play the game. Is that like I would love to be invited back to this table. I hope I'm not going to remember who wins. I'm going to remember if we had a good time, and I want to play with people that I would love to invite back, and I hope to be one of those people too.
Yeah, like I have played. When we were in Minneapolis, I mean, Dana was fairly local to that, and so I would play games with a lot of Dana's friends, and so I made plays that were reflective of, okay, I want to make sure that they know like Dana's friends are good people. I'm going to not make him look like a schlub because I was a jerk and I was a tryhard in any given game. And so I really, really hate the idea that you can't intentionally make a suboptimal play because it makes the game better for everyone else involved.
Yeah, and Matt, that worked out great. I heard back from a whole bunch of people that said like they got to play games with you, and the general consensus was that you were fine. They're like, yeah, I played with Matt. He's all right.
He's a little pale in the daylight, but he's not too bad.
So yeah, I mean that worked for you. You did a nice job there.
Okay, well, I'm glad I reflect well on your friends.
Oh my word, Dana.
To move on to like one more thing, I think we've heard quite a bit. People think we have way more power with regards to, I don't know, everything, whether it's bannings or previews or who gets free product, or like the amount of pull that content creators have with Wizards of the Coast is so much less than people seem to think they have.
If we had any say, then we would get preview cards again. Right. Like, when was the last time we got a preview card?
Technically, we got some reprints for Commander Masters, and they should.
That's true, yeah.
You know, Wretched Confluence sure was a reprint.
We would get we would get cool preview cards if we had anything to say about it. There's your proof.
The way that WotC interfaces with the creators out there is subject of some scrutiny, and certainly not one that favors the people who are out there doing stuff on the online.
Well, and like, it's funny that, you know, we had Gavin Verhey on an episode a long time ago, and he said, oh yeah, well, like, we use your guys' website. We use EDHREC pretty much every day while we're working on card design. We still don't get preview cards. So like, I don't know what else to tell you, folks. If you think we have power, I appreciate that vote of confidence.
Yeah, like one specific thing I've heard mentioned before was that particularly people like in the ambassador program have control over who gets preview cards and who's getting free product, and like they're able to manipulate the system somehow.
Right.
First of all, for example, the first time I heard this was, days after the ambassador program was announced, and like they send those preview cards and stuff out weeks in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So just the notion that this group of like 40 people was somehow getting together and collectively, quietly determining where things happen, it's just such an absurd thing to accuse people of, that I don't even know quite how to address or why you would think that was a real thing.
Yeah, I don't have nice things to say about that type of thing either. Yeah,
saying that the ambassador program is some secret cabal that's running things for Wizards of the Coast. They meet at the corner of the flat Earth that is 300 miles that way, and that it's such a silly thing to say that this brand new program is now running Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah, and there are certainly there are cases where the Commander Advisory Group or the Rules Committee may have an NDA where they'll see some stuff in advance and they'll give some feedback to it, but WotC does not have to listen to that. And sometimes they don't, obviously. So.
And what's wild about that, Joey, is that at least before the Rules Committee expanded with Jim and Olivia, 3/4 of the Rules Committee worked in the WotC offices. They worked for Wizards of the Coast, and so. It's just wild to me, the Rules Committee has all the say. I'm like, they're in the building already, and they still don't have that much say.
What tells me a lot is that I often see people say stuff like, "Oh, the CAG banned," and I'm like, I'm going to stop you right there. The CAG didn't ban anything. That's again not how this works.
And if WotC wants to run things past content creators in terms of getting decisions, they'll just do what they've done in the past and hire them.
Yeah.
Because there's been content creators that they've hired to work at Wizards of the Coast that are now making decisions, and that's just what they'll do. They are not going to put decisions regarding their game in the hand of people who do not have skin in the game.
Yeah.
That's just not how it's not how any corporation works, let alone one as large as Hasbro. That's just not a thing that's happening.
If they need their expertise, they'll just hire them. Yeah, that's an absolutely fantastic point, Daniel. A lot of the card design team and the casual play design team, those are just former players that they hired because they appreciated their approach to card design, so they brought them on board. If they want their say on cards that are going to get printed, they'll just hire them.
There are a lot of conversations that people want to have to approach the truth and find out more complexities behind the stuff that goes on with this, because it's interesting and it's fascinating to find out. But I worry so much that a lot of those conversations get hijacked by people who forget that other people are people. That's what really blows. To label anyone as out of touch is to reject the possibility of actual constructive conversation or mutual understanding. It's a way of disengaging and crafting an echo chamber. And that's why I'm just that's why if folks are sensing some in this episode from us, it's that's why, because we keep on sometimes you
Joey,
see this and it's just
we're friends with some of the people that are Magic ambassadors, and do you think our friends, knowing us, would have willingly designed Turgid as a commander if they had so much sway over the cards that are printed? Is that what you're telling me, Joey?
Oh goodness! I my brain is doing two different things. I'm just do I go with Matt's bit or do I move on somehow? And I can't decide on one. So I'm just here, just doing oh man, I sure have had some experiences that make me regret being a person who was ever online.
I mean, yeah, we can certainly move on then, but it's just pulling the curtain back a little bit, I guess, is kind of what we really wanted to do for all you folks out in Listenerland, because there's just some misconceptions that we see, and we're just kind of I don't know about this. I mean, all these conversations that we've been having here for you today, we've had it privately, and maybe we've been a little less specific and measured with our words, but the spirit of the conversations have all been there.
There was definitely more swearing involved, probably, but
more calling people a jabroni.
Yeah.
Weirdly, the same number of dad jokes, though.
Yes, absolutely. No, kind of my summary of all this, I guess, would be there's definitely differences in experiences, and we went over a lot of what those are. Mm-hmm. But different experiences doesn't translate to out of touch.
There you go.
Because and I would say not only that, it's kind of a two-way street. Perhaps as a content creator, you experience things in a way that gives you more insight in some regard to both what's happening at WotC, what's happening behind the scenes and decision-making processes. So in some regards, you are probably more in touch with some of the things that are happening than people out there in the wild who aren't part of this whole system. I just think just because it's different doesn't necessarily mean it's bad or sometimes not as
perfectly as valid as anyone else's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Not as valid. There we go.
With the echo chambers that occur online, I think that these types of accusations become more prominent. And because people see something that, Matt, I think you were alluding to this earlier, when people see something that doesn't align with their opinion, they assume that the people who made that type of decision must not be understanding something crucial. And I just want to invite the possibility that maybe they do understand you and they just still disagree with you. Like, it's not that they don't understand. It's not that they're out of touch. Maybe they have already considered that and they still came to a different conclusion. And so, all right, let's dive into why. That will be more productive for everyone all around.
I mean, it is fun to like joke and be silly here and just say, oh, Joey and I don't agree and Joey's wrong, ha ha. But like, really, like, it's entertainment value. That's us being silly and having fun. When it comes to anything serious, like, it's okay to disagree. Just respect the other person's opinion and how they got there. You don't have to agree, but you do have to at least, like, for the most part, respect, like, especially when it comes to Magic the Gathering, what their stance is and what their belief is about, like, XYZ with this game.
Yeah, this stuff's complicated. And the authenticity, I hope we can like showcase it, but also not every episode that we do can feel like this one.
Right.
Like, I think that folks will probably wonder, why don't they talk like this in all of their episodes? It's just like, because most of the time we're geeky, joyous guys and new stuff came out that we want to talk about, or our decks did something cool that we want to talk about, or there's stats that we want to challenge. And like, my MO is just like, hey, here's cool stuff to do. And I want to focus on that the majority of the time because I think that is the way that I can be most productive and make something cool for folks.
Yeah.
So that's why not every episode is going to sound like this one. I hope that most of our episodes don't sound like this one.
Yeah. Like we said before, there's a time and a place, and the time for an episode like this might be now, but not every episode is the right time. And so, yeah, like I said, we wanted to give everybody a chance to kind of see the curtain revealed moment, like you said, Joey, but still, try to make it a little interesting and a little entertaining for everybody too.
Yeah. Still far too many dad jokes. I just...
You're not going to get over those. You're not going to get your segues back. And that's just how life is going to be, Joey. This is 2023, the year where you don't get to do what you want to do.
I can't wait until hopefully this bit evolves, the stealing the segue bit evolves, and then Matt, in 2024, hopefully we're stealing it from you. I'm going to coordinate with Dana about all right, we're gonna just lull him into a false sense of security, but it turns out he's not gonna get it anymore.
Hey Dana, where can everybody find you on social media, by the way?
Stealing all my segues even to the outro? How dare you?
You can find me online at Dana Roach, and you can find all of us together at patreon.com/EDHRECast.
And I'm Matt Morgan. You can find me at Mathimus55 on pretty much any social media platform. And don't forget, Wednesday evenings, we're streaming over at twitch.tv/EDHRECast as well. Joey, where can everybody find you at?
I refuse to answer your question, Matt.
No, you don't.
Because how dare you? No, yeah. Folks, you can find me at Joseph M. Schultz. I'm on the Instagrams now. Figuring out how to do that, I don't know, it's kind of fun. And if you've got a question for us, you can find us online at EDHRECast or contact us at EDHRECast@gmail.com. Our thanks go out once again to Chase for assisting me with the post-production of the show. You can find them online at Mana Curves. And listeners, we'd love to hear back from you about this one. We hope that it's been an interesting peek behind the curtain. And until next time, please remember to EDHREC your deck before you wreck your deck.